Hello and welcome to Robinson Hall Experts Talk. My name is Laura Saunders, Marketing and PR Manager, and today on the 3rd of June I have David Cook with me. David Cook is a Senior Building Surveyor and we are going to discuss tackling damp and mould, protecting your home and health. David joined Robinson Hall over a year ago and has over 40 years experience as a building surveyor. David specialises in building surveys for a range of properties. Welcome, David.
Good morning.
So, first things first, what are the most common property issues homeowners face today, and where do damp and mould rank amongst them?
Okay, well, I would say that the normal, fairly typical issues that homeowners face are damp and mould. Issues with heating installations, heating failures,
Okay.
electrical failures in the property, leaks to plumbing systems, just general decay of the property. Property does tend to age over time and bits of it decay and you'll get wear in the components that make it up, roofing, flashings, chimneys, various other things going on. So there is an issue of general wear and tear and decay on the building. And also, to some extent, less so as in terms of a normal day-to-day issue, is general compliance issues, making sure the place is safe, complying with fire safety, got means of escape and fire detection in the property, etc. So, in terms of listing those in order, I would say probably these days, damp and mould is about the most common and probably one of the most important that homeowners will have to face and will have to deal with.
Yeah. Right, that's interesting. So why are mould and damp problems becoming more visible or concerning right now?
A number of reasons. Firstly, as building standards improve, buildings tend to get, or are designed to be, less drafty. Back in the old days of Victorian properties, you'd get sliding sash windows, which people complained were a bit drafty, but actually what I did do is provide ventilation to the property, which was really helpful in keeping the air clean and purging any moisture in the building. But modern buildings aren't as drafty. They're more sealed, so you don't get the air movement within the building, which means any moisture in the property stays in the property.
Yeah.
But also in terms of use, people tend these days to keep windows shut more often, particularly with things like heating costs going up and up and up and up. Not using heating quite as much, so the property is sealed and you don't get the purge of wet and moist air going on. And that means that there's moisture in the air, which is causing condensation and mould.
What's the biggest misconception people have about mould in the home?
I think the biggest one is that mould is typically found in badly maintained or dirty homes. I've heard that said by a number of people. That's not the case at all. I've visited quite a lot of very grand properties where maintenance clearly isn't an issue for them, but in terms of the day-to-day use of it and the fabric construction of the building, they're getting mould issues as well. So they're getting the same sort of issues in bedrooms, in utility rooms, etc., that any property on any estate would get. So it's a common problem, becoming more common, and I think that it's not just confined to a particular type of property or particular type of occupier.
Right.
Any property can suffer from mould and damp.
Yeah, 'cause I guess most people would presume it would be like the older properties. But from what you're saying, in actual fact, that's not the case.
Well, it can happen in any property. Older properties can have mould and damp and mould because if they're very old, they'll have solid wall construction, and solid wall construction means colder walls because you haven't got the cavity which keeps the temperature of the wall higher. And moisture in the air will settle on the colder walls and then you start to get condensation forming. But in older properties, you also got natural draft in the property because of the way it was built, so that tended to purge. Modern properties are a bit warmer, so you don't get the cold surfaces, but because the moist air is not purged from the property, it can be fairly common in modern properties too. So it's an issue for properties of any type, depending on how the properties are used and maintained.
Okay. So can you explain the different types of damp, e.g. rising, penetrating, condensation, in simple terms?
Okay, rising and penetrating damp, they are primarily building defect issues.
Okay.
So rising damp is moisture which comes up the wall due to lack of a damp-proof course or bridging the damp-proof course, and can cause dampness inside the property as the wall becomes wetted and causes dampness inside. Penetrating damp, and these are fairly simplified descriptions, but penetrating damp tends to be caused by water getting into the property due to a defect. And that can be a leak in the roof, it can be pointing in brickwork, it can be gaps around windows, it can be any sort of route in for the moisture to get into the property. So it's caused by an external fabric problem,
Right.
which will cause damp patches and dampness inside the property. Condensation is not typically, it may be related to, but it's not typically caused by a building defect. It's caused primarily by high levels of moisture in the air.
Right.
And that is due generally to occupancy and use of the building.
So I guess,
So to say if you've got a significant damp problem in the property with a roof leak or water coming into the wall, you may well get condensation and mould caused by that. So there is a bit of an overlap. When you get moisture, you will tend to get condensation and mould. If it's purely caused by moisture in the air, condensation, you'll typically see it settling on surfaces. So you'll get, for instance, on glazing in the morning when you wake up, there'll be moisture on the glass, on the window sills. You'll get moisture on the walls. You'll get moisture in tiled areas, bathrooms, etc., because there's high levels of moisture and it's settling on the colder surfaces. If it's caused by a building fabric issue, the first thing you'll probably see is a damp patch, which is where the water's getting through the external fabric into the building, and that's where it manifests itself on the plasterwork,
right.
etc.
Okay.
So not quite the same in terms of the early warnings.
Yeah. So what are the early warning signs people often overlook?
I'd say the early warning signs will be high level of moisture on glazing and sills, etc.
And people just ignore it.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. Or they will tend to deal with it as a symptom and not think about the cause. So you've got what seems to be a condensation problem, and you clean it up, you mop it up. You may try and do some work to overcome or hide the mold growth, but actually what you're not doing is dealing with the cause, and therefore you haven't dealt with the issue, and it will recur.
So the solution, would it not be to like open your windows, consider like ventilation?
Yeah, opening windows is very, very good way of dealing with it. You need ventilation to reduce condensation. As I said, properties are now less well ventilated than they used to be. If it is possible, then opening windows in bedrooms is always a good thing to do. Increasing heating levels where you can. The way that works is that moisture in the air will stagnate and will settle on colder surfaces. If you put the heating on, it generates convection currents and the air will move around the room. And if you've got some ventilation, that will combine together to purge the moist air from the room. If you've not got any ventilation, so you've got no air movement, and the room is colder because you're not using the heating, then the room will be cold enough for condensation to settle on colder surfaces. So yeah, heating and ventilation, absolutely key to trying to get rid of any condensation issues.
And then I guess, so there's a bit of a crossover between condensation and obviously mould, and it could be an element of moisture in the air, but also a structural damage. So I guess if you're if you're opening your windows and you're dealing with the ventilation, you're still getting quite a high level of condensation. Would it then be a opportunity to possibly get a building surveyor out?
Yeah, I mean, if you've tried those sort of things and you're just still getting condensation, just a little bit happening and you can't deal with it, then maybe a dehumidifier is a good thing to do in the first place, to try and get the moisture levels down in the room to see if that cures it.
Yeah.
If that's not working, then seek advice on what the causes may be, and it may be that you need more ventilation or you need to think about another way of dealing with it.
Okay.
But often people do tend to try and resolve condensation issues by using things like bleach. And bleach is commonly used as a sort of cure-it-all for condensation and mould, but the problem with bleach is it tends to lighten the stain, but it doesn't cure the problem.
Yeah.
Also, painting over, if you paint over mould, you painting over it temporarily, it will come back through, so you'll be doing it again and again. So what you really want to do is cure the problem, not just deal with the symptoms. Okay,
that's good advice. So why do some homes seem more prone to mould than others?
It may be that there are properties with maintenance issues which haven't been resolved properly, allowing the properties to be damper. As I said, it may be that it just happens to be a property which is colder construction with solid walls, which are more likely to get condensation settling on them. There could be ventilation problems. Either ventilation isn't adequate or it's not being used, or if it's mechanical ventilation, it's not working. But also it could be due to occupancy levels. People produce quite a lot of moisture in a property, not just for the activities they do like cooking and showering and washing dry clothes, but just when you're asleep, you produce quite a lot of moisture into the air. And if you've got a number of people in the property, you're producing a relatively high level of moisture into the air, and that's got to be dealt with somehow.
Okay. So, if you are listening and you're kind of one of those that seems to be, as David said, just kind of dealing with the issue, but not necessarily thinking about the cause, how serious are the health risks associated with mould exposure?
Potentially very serious. Typically, the sort of things that can occur due to condensation and mould, particularly the spores in the mould, respiratory issues. It can lead to issues of allergies.
Yeah.
If you've got significant mould and condensation in the property, it can lead to quite a lot of stress, which is proving to be a bit of an issue. It has proved, unfortunately, tragically impactful. There was a toddler died due to excess mould in a property fairly recently, which resulted in a change of the law to try and deal with it, to try and make sure the mould is dealt with, and that's something we'll talk about later on. It's very, very important that it is dealt with. The NHS actually advised that people are more likely to have respiratory or allergy issues if they are in damp and mouldy homes. So it's recognised within the health service as well as being a significant issue which needs attention.
Gosh, yeah, I didn't realise how serious it could be. So are there everyday habits that unknowingly make mould worse?
The everyday life generally, but the key things that do increase moisture in the air, cooking is a primary one. The saucepan on top of the stove bubbling away, fairly innocuous, but the amount of moisture being pumped out is significant.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to people in properties complaining about condensation and mould, who say that when they cook, the floor gets a little slippy, and you think, well, this is the reason why the whole property, the whole room is now full of moist air.
Yeah.
And it's on every surface. Showering, if you can, leave the window open when you shower. If you've got an extract fan, turn the extract fan on. If you do put the extract fan on, it's always worth leaving it on after you've showered for a period to take the moist air out of the bathroom. So it's not just during the course of the shower itself, because that will take a while to purge and clean, and it's best to get that moisture out. Drying clothes. People wash the clothes, and often, like myself, you might have a clothes horse or airer inside the house where you put clothes on.
Yeah.
And that just means that the moisture evaporates into the air, and again, you've got a potential source of condensation and mould there. So just something to be aware of. If you're doing that, if you're drying clothes internally, if you can open a window or get out in the garden, then that will help enormously.
Okay, that's good to know. What should someone do when they first notice damp or mould? You've probably you've touched on this a little bit, but yeah, what would be your kind of first step?
But the first one, really, I was talking about it a little bit already, is increased ventilation.
Yeah.
That's the really prime way of dealing with it. It gets the air moving, it purges the moist air, it allows fresh air to come in and the stale moist air to go out. So that's a really prime issue.
Okay.
We should do that as a first part. Clean it, get it off the surface so it doesn't develop into mould, it doesn't get spores growing.
And what would you clean it with? Because obviously you said bleach is a no.
Well, the first thing to do is just to get rid of the moisture. So if you just towel off any moisture and get it dry.
Yeah.
But then a mould inhibiting treatment would
Okay.
be recommended. Not bleach, because bleach, as I said before, only lightens the stain. It doesn't actually kill
Yeah.
the spores. So
Okay.
seek professional advice if you're not sure. Hopefully that will help.
What mistakes do people commonly make?
Waiting too long is the first one. If you've got a condensation issue and you're dealing with it every day, you've got a problem. So just addressing the moisture on the windowsill every morning isn't dealing with the fact you've got a condensation and ventilation problem. So once you realise there's an issue there, it needs to be dealt with, because it will only get worse. So the first thing is waiting too long, and then, as I said, removing the mould without treating the cause, because it's a symptom, and it's a symptom of something that needs to be addressed. So once you've realised there's an issue there, it needs to be addressed as a problem. As I mentioned, things like dealing with bleach don't resolve it, and painting of it don't resolve it. So you need to have a bit more of a deep dive into what's causing it.
Okay. How much can damp and mould issues cost to fix if ignored?
It's quite hard to put a cost on that. Obviously you've got the health impacts, which can't really put a price on at all, but are significant potentially. But in terms of the property, it will cause damage. If left untreated, it will cause damage within the property, not only to decorations, but also to furnishings, soft fabrics, So all sorts of materials in the property will be damaged by the spore
Yeah,
growth.
because I guess it could get on that, couldn't it?
It will, and it's very difficult to clean effectively. So potentially, if it's left untreated, then the soft furnishings in the property will be damaged and perhaps irreparable. So just something to be aware of. But the decorations, certainly, once it's embedded in decorations, that will potentially require significant work as well to get rid of it.
It's not just a question of painting over it. Is it almost like they'd have to look at getting it off the wall and possibly replastering and things like that?
Potentially, and certainly the decoration, if you're going to do it, it'll need a deep clean before you can redecorate. And the decoration will need to be done using suitable materials, not just normal emulsion paint.
Okay. So who is responsible for dealing with mould when it comes to residential properties? Is it the landlord or is it the tenant?
Well, as we mentioned before, it can be caused by building fabric issues, or it can be caused by activities in the property, lifestyle, if you call it that. If it's a building fabric issue where you've got a roof leak or penetrating damp coming through the external walls or up through rising damp into the property, then the landlord should take action. I mean, some of these, there may be an overlap in terms of what's causing it, so there needs to be a bit of a discussion, investigation first. But generally, building fabric, it would make sense for the landlord to deal with it. If it's down to activity and lifestyle and usage, then the tenant should be looking to see what they're doing, to see whether they can mitigate the actions they're taking to reduce the moisture in the air. Okay.
Are there any legal obligations property owners should be aware of?
There are, the Landlord and Tenant Act makes specific reference, and there shouldn't be any damp in a property that's being let out. If the property is covered by the HHSRS, which is the safety rating system for housing, then that's covered as well. Damp is considered a hazard as far as that legislation goes. There'll be obligations under any lease that a landlord has with a tenant to maintain the property and keep it in a good condition. So these are all things that we'll need to do just to maintain the property to a reasonable standard. If damp is present and is not addressed, then the local council can take action.
Right.
So a complaint to the local authority may result in enforcement action to deal with it. But I mentioned earlier on the tragic case of a young toddler that died resulted in something called AWAB's law, which now puts obligations on landlords to deal with damp in a very, very timely fashion. So if there's an issue which is considered an emergency, they should take action within 24 hours. If they need to investigate to come up with a cause and some proposals to deal with condensation, damp and mould in property, then they've got to deal with that within 10 days. So it can't be something that goes on and on for months and months and months untreated. So there is an obligation to deal with it. So landlords must be aware of those obligations.
So if someone's listening and it sounds like we're pretty much describing your property, what should they do? You know, obviously you're an expert in building surveying, and would it be a question of calling yourself?
We're more than happy to give advice. I mean, the first thing to do is if you think there's a problem there, if you're seeing the symptoms of condensation regularly, and certainly if you start seeing mould growth, you need to deal with it quickly. So the first thing to do is to be prepared to act and not leave it. If you're not sure what to do, if you want some advice and guidance, we're more than happy to speak to you, give you a bit of advice, come out and have a look at it and see what we can suggest and recommend, be it any advice and guidance on building fabric issues, or anything we may be able to suggest in terms of improved ventilation, which may not be a defect, but may require some upgrades in terms of improving the property. For instance, if you've got a property which the ventilation appears poor, then it may be sensible to install extract fans, which aren't there currently, to try and reduce to try and improve the ventilation and reduce the moisture in the property. And those things will be fairly easy to identify. So first to do is remember one thing, act quickly. And if you're not sure, please get advice. It's something that should be taken seriously. I mean, we wouldn't want to instill any sort of major concern or panic about condensation and mould, but it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And if you've got a problem with it, then you need to be dealing with it. And if we can help, then please get in touch.
Is there anything else, David, that you wanted to touch on before we conclude?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot of stuff on there. So all I would say, repeat what I said a moment ago, is if anyone's unsure what to do and needs a bit of advice, please get in touch. More than happy to have a chat with them to see if we can assist.
Great. Thank you ever so much for your time today. If you did want to speak to David, his contact details can be found on our website on the Meet the Team page. If you also want to find out more about the services we offer, if you look at the building surveying pages, you'll see David's contact details there as well. Thank you for listening. I've launched a variety of podcasts over recent months and years. There may be other topics that interest you, so please have a look at our website and our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to access all the subjects. I think this is number 30 or 31, so there's quite a few there. But yes, hopefully you'll tune in again. Thanks again. Bye. Our podcasts are for informational purposes only and are based on the information available at the date of the recording. Listeners are responsible for how they interpret and use the information, and Robinson Hall LLP will not be responsible for any losses, damages or liabilities that may arise from a listener relying on the information given. Listeners should take advice from an appropriate professional which is tailored to their specific needs.